Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Drunken Tarrasque.
Where all your Mary Sues go directly into the wood chipper.
Oh, yes, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking about the DM's most favorite character, the Mary Sue.
The dreaded Mary Sue character. So, a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today is what is a Mary Sue? What does it mean in relation to a tabletop gaming session? Why it's bad? How it affects gameplay.
Well, first things first, a Mary Sue is essentially a character that can pretty much do anything, well-beloved, may have a tragic backstory, but apparently everyone loves them, and all in all, can never do wrong.
But it's really easy for a character like this to exist in a literary universe and everything because the person who is writing this character gets to control all of the other characters. But in a tabletop gaming session, you have the DM, and he's or she or Zer or whatever is in charge of what happens at their table, and so they control all of the non-playable characters. And they put events in front of the PCs. But the way that a Mary Sue exists is it exists really only in the mind of the player that is creating it, because they have this idea in their head of this awesome, great character, but they're only awesome in their head because they haven't done anything to provoke that response in terms of gameplay. That's really what makes them a Mary Sue. Is usually when you're playing a game, you have to do certain things to provoke response or earn that level of praise.
Yeah, Mary Sue's, we've been playing games for a while, and Rachel has handled the 100% side of playing with Mary Sue's.
Oh, gosh.
And as a DM myself, having Mary Sue's in my game, I'm surprised I don't have gray hairs. It's one of those things that it will affect and bother players and the DM, or GM, whatever you want to call yourself, mainly because they go against, I would argue, the fundamental ideals and ideas of what a role-playing game is. As Rachel had pointed out, you're thrown events, and these events, when they're thrown at you, you kind of have to respond. Mary Sue's don't rise to the occasion at all.
Well, it's mainly because they believe that the character is already awesome the way that they are, and there's no reason for them to change. There's no room for growth or anything because they're already awesome. They're already, like, the way that they're supposed to be. You've already created them as this unchangeable thing that's set in stone, and a person who's usually playing a Mary Sue is usually inexperienced, but there are some people who are experienced and should know better. We can do it anyway.
I think one of the other things those who are experienced and they make Mary Sue's comes more down to they want to be the hero, and they will do anything to be the hero and becoming the Mary Sue, which is, I think that's the other part of it, because this is a fantasy field of area, like fantasy in the sense that you're making up your own world, you're making up these things, and you can do anything. You're not restricted by your physical limitations, only your imagination and the imagination of the DM.
And some of this, I think, comes from the desire of the player to want to create perhaps not just a character they relate to, but a character that is sort of a physical representation of themselves, so they're more likely to get a little bit defensive if you try to suggest that they need to change, or that maybe there should be, maybe they're not role playing in relation to the events that are happening around them, because that's another thing is that you see with a Mary Sue. In fact, red flags you can look for when you're a DM and you're looking at character sheets is that they will probably have a really involved description of their backstory and everything, but they don't describe basic things about the character, like who they are, their temperament,
personality.
their personality, and their major goals that are driving them forward to do what they do.
One of the other things as a DM I've noticed with people who create Mary Sue's, they have a tendency, and I don't think this is just little bits, but it's like most of them, they will grab their character sheet, they will huddle off in a corner, and then they'll come back with it. Because with the creation of characters, I treat it as a group experience for everyone to enjoy and to build, because more or less when you build a character, people will start picking off like things that they think is bad, or they'll add things that they think are cool. Shizuka, one of Rachel's characters for L5R. Yes, we'll talk about L5R, a game that I've very rarely heard talked about. It started off as a very cool and interesting character, and then came to the point is, how do we make her human? How much OCD does a character deserve? Rachel can explain.
Yeah, I remember having this really great concept for a character. I wanted her to be able to do a lot of things because she's a scorpion. But then I realized, okay, you have to make these very finite decisions set in stone, things you can't have your character do it all. You can't have them do all of their roles. You have to pick certain roles and stick to those and specialize. And that's the main thing that you want to focus on when you're building a character as a player. Mm-hmm. Is what is your role? What is your job as a part of a team? It's not just the you.
I'm the hero. Single player-itis.
Yeah, it's single player-itis. In fact, we'll probably have to talk about that one day and just do a show on single player-itis. But the whole idea is that you feel like it's like the world revolves around you. It's not a team game. It's you're the best. You're the only one that matters.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things with building a character, and as Rachel was describing how she had to think about this, it's also with the character growth, and what I call an important question to ask is, for something like D&D, what is your alignment? And how does the player view alignments, which is one of the biggest things I've noticed with Mary Sue's and really bad characters.
Oh, you're gonna bring it up. It's chaotic, the dreaded chaotic neutral. Yeah, that's usually another red flag right there, is that they will choose chaotic neutral. And that's usually code for chaotic stupid or fuck you, I'll do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Do what I want.
Yeah, that is one of those things that becomes the more very stressful job for the DM, because chaotic neutral, I've only seen one person handle what appeared to be chaotic neutral pretty well. Thank you, Brandon. I love you to death. Don't murder me. But it comes down to, it's a lot of this time is you got to really think. And this is a cooperative game. You can't be by yourself. And one of the other things I've noticed with very Mary Sue characters, they love the exotic characters in the world to be picked and played as.
Oh, yeah. They will have a whole bunch of descriptions about their appearance and how they look exotic and all the little special things about that, but they won't have anything about their personality whatsoever. So you don't know what they are like day to day. One of the things I do like about the L5R game that we were talking about, which we are gearing up for in the future, is that they give you something like 100 questions to answer about your character as a part of the character building process. And one of the things that they ask you to do is, what does your character do on their downtime? What are their little mini quirks? What are the things that they do on a regular basis that make them different from everybody else?
That one, if I had the book right in front of me, another important question is, how does your family feel about you? How do you feel on biases? And one of the biggest things, L5R is a game that you can die very easily. Not as easy as Call of Cthulhu, but pretty damn easy. It asks, how do you perceive yourself dying? And that is something that I've taken from L5R and am transporting to any other game I've played, mainly because I've asked that question to Mary Sue characters, and they always run it down to either old age and I'm the hero. Yeah. And it's one of those things that made me go, aha! And it also made me facepalm because I went, shit, I did that to one of my own characters.
Yeah. And you have to... What governs with how you would like to die is what your character values, honestly. Like, do they die protecting someone they love? Do they die protecting a city that they love, or things that they have worked to create, defending things that they believe in? Or was it because they get caught doing something sneaky and messed up?
Exactly. It's a lot of these little things. Another one of the things I think is a very good thing is, Rachel had brought this up to me talking to me, character growth. Their character growth, quote unquote, is the statistics on the page that I just flipped around, not the character himself, because I've had a very special magical entity from the ethereal planes and the lower planes of devils, where their character growth was being able to fling fireballs, being able to fling energy around, manipulating the minds, but not growing as a character who could handle the difficulties of the world.
And they didn't act at all the way that they should have in response to some of the stimulus that was coming from a lot of the really bad events that were happening to our party. A lot of stuff was happening. We had a beloved NPC die, and everybody was grieving. And unfortunately,
the Mary Sues did not.
That character, who was actually supposedly involved potentially romantically with that NPC, that character we're talking about, did not respond in the way that you would expect them to respond to losing their beloved.
Yeah, it's not the style of, oh my god, I shut down, because this was playing as a male character, which there's ways to handle it as a male, but it immediately jumped to, let's buy a house. Let's
exactly.
Do this. And it's not like I'm going to spend my pain away, which was for me personally, the very frustrating point, because I like character growth. I like to give people the options to grow, because I did something that as a DM that Rachel was pretty much crying in tears, like, oh my god, you did this. I had her tearing away that she thought, the character thought their love interest was coming back, but turned out to be an assassin doppelganger.
Yeah.
Instead of breaking down in tears, in rage, it just went on to the next session like it was nothing.
Yeah, and then there was the whole weird side thing about trying to buy a house, but we'll talk about that perhaps another time. I think that perhaps we should really talk about how this affects other characters, because when you have this kind of character, you have a lot of this stuff. The character's awesomeness, like I said before, only exists within the mind of the person who created that character. Everybody else is going to think they're an asshole, honestly, because they
That's
act.
what they act like.
Yeah, because they act like, I'm already awesome. Why aren't you responding to me in the way that I want you to? And they will act that way to other members of the party, of the team, other playable characters, and they'll be like, well, why aren't you responding to me in the way that I
also
that I think you should?
It can get a couple of degrees worse than that. My own personal experience in Pathfinder, where I was playing my beloved Rin. The paladin was supposed to be the negotiating, talking type. This person could not roleplay to save their life. I mean, quite literally, it would make even Mahatma Gandhi or the Dalai Lama want to punch him in the throat. And he starts getting mad, not only at characters, or playable characters, but at us ourselves, for not going along with him, because he's the talker, because his charisma's high, because he put points in diplomacy, because he did not engage like a human being. He said, I am a god at diplomacy, you must bend to my will because these stats say so. Because the whole scene was set up as he was condescendingly talking down to our favorite character, and I said very much similar things, but phrased it in a language that character would hear and understand and take it to heart. And that's the important thing, is knowing your stats, how they actually are supposed to function. That might be another show in and of itself. Yeah.
But another thing to bring up, though, is that min-maxers and the Mary Sue characters often overlap. And because the reason being is because they have this idea in their mind of this awesome character who's awesome in every way, and you have to respond to them in this way, and so they try to make their stats say this. However, what it comes down to is how you role play the scene out. Like, you might have amazing charisma and everything. But if you don't role play this out properly, it, you're not going to get the response that you want. I mean, I can understand if you're trying to convince somebody of something and you crit, you get a critical success, but you don't engage with the NPC in a way that's going to be beneficial. Your success is only going to be limited. You're not going to get the desired result that you want.
And for a DM and players, one of the things how I try my best to handle Mary Sue characters is that if they're trying to be gods and everything, I'm one of these guys who go, if you can roleplay it, dice rolls are not as important. And it kind of is a way to encourage Mary Sue's to actually be human, to actually try to engage as a human being.
Yep.
Because without that...
Because that's really what it comes down to, is it doesn't matter if you're playing like an orc or an elf or a pixie, you have to have this sort of human element that is relatable. You have to play them kind of like a person, or if you're not playing a person, if there's a special way you're supposed to act like that thing. Okay, if there's a set with their own set of social rules and things like that, play that. But ultimately, you can't be playing what amounts to a demigod. You can't be.
Unless you have a game that's designed for demigods, that's another story.
Yeah,
but as a whole,
But even so, there are always going to be obstacles in your way. There are always problems that your character is going to have, and if you don't give your character flaws, because that's really what this comes down to, you're going to get bored really easy, and everybody is going to get annoyed with the character. Your team is going to break down and implode, because that has a real effect on other characters when they see that, this person over here is min-maxing and they're being an asshole.
Or here's one of the other things is that you can make the Mary Sue with the level of deficiencies of insanity, which I've seen. I'm more put upon, which I've seen of that style of I'm more put upon, so I've already succeeded in so much. Which is one of the other things that I would warn people looking out for Mary Sue's. If one of your character has a ton of flaws, and they somehow can actually function and overcome them already, or have already overcome them. Because that's going to cause a lot of serious issues mechanically, in-game, and story-wise, because the Mary Sue's will use those excuses to act like an asshole.
Yeah, they really will. And that's what this comes down to. It's really this kind of inconsistency between what your stats are, the character you've built, and how you're playing it that really make a Mary Sue in a tabletop game. It's honestly a clusterfuck. It messes up everybody else. It messes up how the team works together, because this is usually not a team player. This is a person with single player itis. They only care about themselves, and this isn't even just part of who their character is, because if you play a character like that, it can honestly conflict with the game, unless there are certain special circumstances where you're playing because there is a way to play a selfish character, and where their growth can be that over time perhaps they become attached to the other party members, and they're kind of like, well, I don't like those guys, but I like you guys.
Essentially, the Grinch Stole Christmas moment where your heart grows a few sizes and not needing to go to the hospital.
Yeah, you can have an asshole character as long as they grow. And they change and they become different from when they begin. Because that's really what happens when you go through, because ultimately, when you're going through these different things in a campaign, these are deadly circumstances. And those kinds of things bring people together. They bring characters together.
Well, another thing with Mary Sue's I've noticed is people trying to reproduce their favorite character from another medium.
That's another red flag. For those of you that are listening for the red flags, that is another one. They're like, hey, there's this character in this thing I like. I want to make a character just like...
Yeah, I as a DM I've never thought I'd have to do this. I'm actually writing out a list of do's and don'ts, and I've even had to say, no anime, no cartoon, no comic books, no TV show hero things, based or recreations of, because of the level of destruction to a game that I never thought possible.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because when people see things in their beloved television shows and in books and things like that, they don't realize that they're reading a Mary Sue that doesn't have any kind of major flaws and is practically perfect in every way. They're like, yeah, they had that one time where a bad thing happened. Well, okay, bad things happening to somebody does not equate to a character flaw.
Yeah, it's why I will wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Harry Potter. Yes, I'm going to start that.
Let's be honest. Harry Potter, like, he doesn't really have any serious flaws. He kind of just floats through an entire wizarding war.
Now, those guys who are going to say, you're kind of bouncing around, guys. The reason why we're bouncing around is we're actually giving you legitimate examples what happened in our games. And these are games that you invest a lot of time in. And those who have DM'd, and Rachel has DM'd, she understands now the level of stress that will be put on a DM. And the level of, you understand when a DM starts turning into one of those that wipe them all out without a second thought, you've realized that, oh god, we've really pissed off our DM. We fucked up.
So if we go over the red flags, it's based on a character. They have exotic looks. Mm-hmm. They have an overly involved description.
With no personality.
With no personality or idea of temperament. You don't know what kind of character's there, but you certainly know a lot of stuff about, like, oh, they've got different color eyes. Like, one eye is blue and the other is green.
They already have their end destination set out in front of them already. Not that they hope to drive towards a direction. They've
it's
already
set in stone.
Their story is already written in their head, which is one of the bigger ones that is very hard to break from a player.
They will also do things on a whim because they're not necessarily playing a character. They're playing sort of whatever they feel like in that moment because they haven't really built a character or personality separate from their own. So if they're having a bad day, their character's having a bad day. Mm-hmm. If they don't like somebody, their character doesn't like somebody. And it's just going to be a problem all around. So if you start seeing these red flags pop up one by one...
Yeah, and if your players start describing, oh, they love their character growth, make sure it's an actual character growth, not mechanical growth. Because, yet again, mechanical growth, people who are min-maxers usually very easily become Mary Sue's and vice versa. Because, I asked, oh, did your character grow this session? Because I have set very particular things to make them grow. I got a yes, and then when I asked what was it, it turned into I got to use fireballs, and I was just sitting there like, oh god, no.
Yeah. And a min-maxer also is kind of a blank slate sort of character. They're just a collection of stats that are made so that they're maximized to go blasty doom, to do as much damage as humanly possible. They're like a Frankenstein creature. Now, numbers.
One of the positives, if someone can explain their powers from a story part, reason why, you have a higher chance this person's thinking of their character. Like, one of my characters was a monk. Well, she was meditation, and she was sneaking around, and at the moment where she thought she was going to die, she did shadow steps. She's a monk, shadow monk. It's explaining why and how she used this power without it actually being there, and then she trained some more to actually comprehend this new power that came to her without understanding.
And we won't go too much into min-maxing. That's another show for another time. But
another
the important,
batch of alcohol.
Another batch of alcohol. But the important thing to understand is that when you are building a character and you have a theme in mind, and you know where you're going with that character, what they're like, what their personality is, that's going to guide your decisions on what spells you choose, what kinds of weapons you want to become proficient in. All of those decisions start to govern around that personality. But when they are a Mary Sue, it's all over the place. It's just for raw power.
It's
In
a
fact,
it's a power fantasy in a very unhealthy way because you will start hurting your fellow players, friends, and DMs because
yeah,
you're no longer thinking of let's have fun. You
it's really difficult to deal with,
Mhm.
honestly. For everybody else who's trying to play, because that person will try to steal the limelight anytime, and so it becomes very difficult for the DM to shift attention over to another character
Mhm.
when they want to let them shine, because that's really what the DM is trying to do. Is, you want to make sure that all of your players are able to have fun and engage with the world and other players, and that gets disrupted when you have somebody who hasn't really done the work and
Mhm.
is really just trying to make themselves a Mary Poppins.
Oh yeah, and one other red flag that you guys may want to note: certain multi-classing pushes.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, the biggest thing is hearing a player screaming what they want to do more of without realizing someone else can do that and you can work with them. Like, let's say you're a paladin and you're in Pathfinder and you see your sorcerer flinging spells around doing so much damage and then screaming they want to become a magus. Or someone who's a sorcerer seeing the bard being very good at negotiation and then throwing hissy fit wanting to also multi-class several times in bard so they can
Get more
do
spells and get more
social.
charisma and stuff,
Yeah,
social stuff. Yeah,
it's
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 yeah.
these little things that you start noticing. It's one of the reasons why me personally I'm anti multi-classing because of the level of the abuse. It's something to be very careful, guys. There's nothing wrong with it, but multi-classing yet again has to make sense.
And ultimately, if you have a well-grounded character, it's going to be good for everybody all around. It's going to be good for your DM
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to be easier for them to plan around. It's going to be good for your other characters because they're not going to want to kill you.
Yeah, and
So
you'll be
build
having fun.
flawed characters. Build a character with a theme.
Yes.
I think
I think this is a good time for
yeah.
everyone at the listening to us at the Drunken Tarrasque.
If you like this podcast, subscribe to us on SoundCloud. We're going to be soon on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter at a drunk Tarrasque. Again, that is at a drunk Tarrasque
Yes.
on Twitter.
Yes. From all of us at the Drunken Tarrasque, thank you and happy gaming.
Hi.